How are you?
At present.
So, quickly, I would like to introduce Hank. We are behind schedule. Hank is a counseling psychologist. He has received his PhD from University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and he is a certified both in counseling psychology and CBT by the American Board of Professional Psychology. And more importantly, he is a vibrant member of the ACT list. So, and whenever we have a tricky issue and which goes on and on, Hank will come up with a pithy and witty comment on the issue, and everybody will have the clarity. And that's why we call him our favorite, mama of ACT list. So I like to mention that something related to what Hank is going to do today. He is written a popular self-help pamphlet, which is titled "How to Stop Driving Yourself Crazy," with help from a Christian scriptures. It's available for free download from rebt.org website. I uh, got hold of that. And today we are going to have some insightful experiences, lived experience from Hank, and we are eager to learn from ACT how to link ACT to spirituality. So thanks, Hank, for being here, and over to you.
Okay, so if I'm correct, you all are at the end of the day. And so what I would like to start with is everybody stand up and stretch. Just get out of what you're doing, stand up, put your arms way in the air, turn from, whoop, there's lights up here I'm running into, turn from one side to another. Turns out you're a human being with a body. It's a pretty good idea to kind of give it a chance. Okay.
Really
So,
needed, Hank.
Now the next thing is I almost want to be on a panel with Miranda because I was present for her talk, and so I just want to tack on a little something that might be useful in terms of trauma, and that is the notion that that some things are painfully scary or scarily painful. I don't know which is the first one. But the thing is, that's different than things that are just scary or just painful. If you go on a roller coaster, it can be scary, but not painful. If someone strikes you, it could be painful, but not scary. But when you get those two things together, you have something to deal with that is different than either one of them separately. And so when one is dealing with this thing that gets called trauma, I think if you just unpack it to, oh, this person is dealing with something that's painfully scary. It's not so much important how they got it, but it is important that they do have it, and how are they going to address it. Okay, so let me see here about sharing my screen. I don't have my screen for, oh wait, yes I do, here we are. Okay, share that. And now I'll do this. How about that? So everybody knows where they are. That's very exciting. Let me look here a moment. Okay. And so, For some reason, oh, there we go. Okay. So we're going to do willingly act for spiritual development. I'm not going to make any money out of this, and I work as a private practitioner, so I'm still not going to make any money out of this, and now we can move on. But before, well, just to look at this, I want to take note of the fact that this idea of spirituality has been around the ACT, ACBS, whatever you want to call this group of people who are doing things for a long time. In fact, Steve Hayes has said the beginning of ACT, the beginning of his contextual behavioral science entry into treatment was this paper, Making Sense of Spirituality. Now, it's going to be very common to try to use technical phrases like self as context or whatever kind of technical phrase that you might want to use. But nobody talks about your internal verbal repertoire because everybody knows that a mind is a much more useful kind of term to use because that's how people talk. And so while there's going to be a lot of perhaps, oh, well, you mean self as context, the reason I'm talking about spirituality is, as far as my kind of cultural background is, people are recognized they have a body and they have a mind, that kind of radio program that's in there going 24 hours a day. And then there's another aspect of their being, the spiritual aspect. And since we already have this nice trilogy to work with, I want to use that trilogy and talk about spirituality. So let me do a couple of things to help bring everyone into this moment and release as much tension as possible. The first thing is something I picked up from a physician who works in an emergency room, emergency department. And he tells me that when people are having trouble there, they often say, well, where are your feet? Because if you're lucky enough to have feet, they're always right here, right now. And then you can ask the second question, well, where are you? Are you here with your feet, or are you somewhere else? And if you're somewhere else, then come join your feet. So I invite you for just a moment, come join your feet. Be here and now with your feet. And now one other thing, I'm going to ask you to take 3 breaths with me. And I don't care how the breath comes in, I don't care how the air comes in. All that I'm interested in is that it goes out at roughly a count of 10. So I'm going to say inhale, and then I'm going to say exhale, and I'm going to count to 10. And I want you to try not to run out of air until I get to 10. So here we go. Inhale, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And again, inhale, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And one last time, inhale, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, most people will find that if they do those 3 breaths, roughly exhaling at a count of 10, they do find the tension tends to reduce somewhat. Maybe a lot, maybe a little, but somewhat. And it's often useful not to have more tension than you need in your body when you're doing things. If you don't have some tension, your head's going to fall over and that's not going to be too good. So you got to have some tension. But if you can reduce it with 3 breaths, maybe 3 more sometimes, um, at least that can be helpful at handling things. And those 2 activities, bringing yourself into the moment, where are my feet, where am I, and releasing tension if you can, using those 3 breaths can often be a helpful way to go. Okay, so willingly act. If you're around me much, you're going to find out I'm a big willingly guy. And in this case, ACT is going to start with willingly acknowledge the world as it is, was, or may be. Now, acknowledging is what denial isn't. You know, sometimes people are, it's just not here. It's just not here. It's just not here. So you can acknowledge, okay, it's here, whatever it is. And then there's a choice about how. You can grudgingly acknowledge or you can willingly acknowledge. Hopefully, this group has had enough experience in life that they can tell the difference between when they're doing something grudgingly and when they're doing it willingly. Fortunately, I haven't had to train that up in anybody. I've been able to find people who already know the difference, and it is an important difference. Then willingly choose and willingly follow your leading principles and values. And I'm going to talk about, well, what do I mean by leading principles and values? But that's a second thing of this particular acronym ACT. And finally, willingly teach others to do the same. You can make headway with your own life, but you can help other people too. And by teaching them, you learn more about it because people fail to get whatever it is in ways different than you do. And so in explaining it or teaching these 2 things to them, willingly acknowledge and willingly choosing, you learn more about the process itself because, as I said, people misunderstand in ways different than you do. And so you have to work around to, well, how do I help them get it? Now, CBS aims, contextual behavioral science aims at prediction and influence with precision, scope, and depth for whole organisms interacting in and with a context considered historically and situationally. So what's our situation? Well, as best I can, I should have asked in the beginning, technology wise, is everybody able to hear me okay? If I just get one nod, I'll know that I'm doing okay. So okay. Thank you very much. I could have
Yes,
earphones.
Hank, very clear.
Okay. So more often than we would like, we don't get what we want, or we do get what we don't want. Uh, if your experience of life is like mine, it's like that. And then you die. Well, there it is. And depending on how your view of the universe is, you'll be back, or maybe you won't. But for here and now, there it is. And when you don't get what you want, or you do get what you don't want, you feel sad. If you're sad enough, tears come out of your eyes. More sad, then in addition to the tears, cries will come out of your throat. And more sad, um, then you get mucus that comes out of your nose. And finally, more sad, your whole body will shake. And if you lay down on the bed in that condition, one of 2 things are going to happen. either after a while you notice that it's stopped, or you fall asleep and you wake up and you notice that it's stopped, and then you get up and have a sandwich. Because as difficult as it sometimes is to believe, life actually goes on until, of course, it doesn't. So if you treat this reality, if you treat the reality that all life is sorrowful as a problem to be solved, you remember a little mathematics here. On one side, you have eliminate sorrow. Well, what do you get on the other side? Then it won't be long before the answer shows up, and that is kill yourself. And as I said, for some, that won't even work because then you'll be back. So sorrow is best treated as an experience to be had, not a problem to be solved. And sometimes you get what you want. You might say you experience fulfillment of your desire. You get those things that you either sort of a little bit want or you deeply desire. So life is filled with sorrow and fulfillment and the places in between. Some fulfillments are like vegetables, they will nourish you, while others are more like candy. No matter how good they taste in the moment, they have little or no nourishment. They don't really sustain us. You might say that some fulfillments are cool, and some are very cool, and some are, in my language, just way cool. There's a guy, German, named Heinrich Zimmer, who said, "The best things can't be told. The second best are misunderstood." Why is this? Because we use ordinary language metaphorically to talk about the best things, and then we misunderstand what's being said because we concretize the metaphors. In other words, we stop using the words metaphorically and act as if they refer to concrete actual events. So, for example, when I was in high school, we had to memorize a poem called The Highwayman, and the first lines began with, "The road was a ribbon of moonlight." Well, if I were to take that concretely, I would say, oh, great, I could go out with my scissors, cut up some hair ribbons, cut up some ribbons to tie around packages. It's a misunderstanding of language. So when we're speaking spiritually, we're often speaking metaphorically. We're speaking about the best things that can't be told, only referred to metaphorically. So we have to be on the lookout for not making the mistake of concretizing the metaphors. So if you're going to pursue the kinds of fulfillments that you experience as way cool, well, what could you do? Try different things and listen for the echo or the resonance inside of yourself. I entered and caught most of Miranda's talk, and I noticed her talking using that word resonance or singing, and you'll see in a moment. It is music that I like to use as a metaphor here. I was long in years before I really came to realize that when people come to tune a piano, they hit the tuning fork for the note first and mess around trying to get the note to sound like that. But that's not how the process ends. The process ends by you hit the note and then the tuning fork just goes off. It just resonates to the note. And that's what you're really searching for, that experience of something in life that just makes something go off inside of you, that echoes, that touches you in a way that isn't so much of your choosing. So way cool can be like one instrument playing softly. If you follow it, the music becomes louder. and more orchestrated, or sometimes it fades away because sometimes it's an illusion. In fact, often people are told, well, pay no attention to those kind of things. It's all an illusion. And that's not really what's serious in life. Here's a rule book, try following that. But the reason I'm using these words of, of resonance or echo or music is because I'm not talking about meaning. Meaning is A is related to B, is related to C, is related to D, and so on. What I'm interested in is, where does it end? Does it end with that resonance, that echo, that music that actually moves you? So will I find ice cream way cool? You could ask somebody who's never had any. You could go read a book about it. If I was being a little derisive, I would say, well, that's the university way. You go read a book about it. Well, you could ask somebody who's actually had some ice cream, but then you also could go eat some ice cream and actually find out for yourself. So pursuing way cool is not just going on an adventure. Now, you might say an adventure has two aspects to it. One is you can't know for sure how it's going to turn out, and there has to be some sense of danger. So if you jump off a one-story building, you don't know for sure if you'll break your leg or walk away. There's some uncertainty to it. If you jump off a 20 or a 30-story building, that's not an adventure. We know how that's going to end. And then if you walk into a park in one entrance without knowledge of how you are going to leave, then you don't know for sure how it's going to turn out, but there's no sense of danger. And so that's not an adventure either. We just call that a walk in the park. But pursuing way cool is not just an adventure, because the way I've described it so far, it's about, well, do I get out of this thing alive and with all my fingers and toes? It's going on an exciting adventure, because the other side of this adventure is something cool could come out of this. So there's always, will I survive it? Will I get through this with all my fingers and toes? But the other side is something cool could come out of this. Now, where do I lean? The cool stuff that could come out of this? Or do I lean on the danger and the uncertainty of the adventure? If you have the two things together, something cool could come out of this. It's not just survival. Then you have an exciting adventure. Now, the way I want to use the word happiness is a willing relationship with life as sorrow and fulfillment. Unhappiness is an unwilling or grudging relationship with life as sorrow and fulfillment. Fulfillment, that's getting what you want. Happiness is not fulfillment. It's not about getting what you want. It's about a willing relationship as life as we actually find it. So the approach here doesn't pit fulfillment against happiness. It's going to encourage the pursuit of both. So I'm going to try now. Well, I can't seem to figure out how to, oh, here we go, stop sharing. You'll pardon my technological dissatisfaction, and I also don't know how to make myself big on the screen. But I see that there are now 34 comments in the chat. Let me see if I can find anything that I can respond to. So talking about something secular is better than spiritual, as every person has a different idea of being spiritual as coming from a different religious or cultural background. Well, in a moment, I'm going to talk about what I understand spiritual to be about. And I think you will find that for those people who are coming from some kind of dualistic idea that there's one kind of world, a physical world, and then there's another kind of a world that's not physical, and that's where the spiritual is. I think the things that you'll hear me say are things that will fit in, but the context that I'm coming from is the CBS context of uh, uh, a one world. It rather than two different kinds of worlds, I'm going to approach this from a single worldview. And we'll see, I think you'll see that even if you had a supernatural kind of view, one would still be able to make use of these things. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and talk about the spiritual self. And I'll often refer to it as that place from which. It's a place from which you can notice. So just notice anything, just notice the screen or notice something else in the room with you. Now, in addition to that noticing, you may also be able to notice that you're noticing. Some people have a hard time doing this. Sometimes when I'm working with clients, they don't, the second part, like noticing, I don't quite get that. But that's okay. If you just notice anything, and then I ask you, who's doing that? Who's doing that noticing? Very likely you will hear in your head, me or I am, something like that. And it ought to be quite clear that no blah, 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 me, I am. Well, that's not what's doing it. Those words are pointing to an aspect of your being that is doing it. And if you follow this kind of odd instruction, but it usually works, take yourself to that place. Well, what place? The place from which you notice. Then you will find that not only is it a place that you can notice, you can also notice that you're noticing. And you can even notice you're noticing and go beyond that. Now, what do I mean by noticing? Well, you can sense my sensing you, sensing me. I see you seeing me. And it remains pretty much unchanged by what it notices. So in your life, you've had very painful experiences. And at least you had some ice cream, which was probably pretty great. You know, sugar and fat, how good can it get? And so you've had quite different experiences, and the thing that notices hasn't been changed by those experiences, or at least hardly changed. It's a place from you can pick anything that you can pick. Now, when I was younger, I tried slam dunking a basketball about 1,500 times. I never could get above the rim, So that was something I couldn't pick because I can't do it. But anything you can do, you can pick what you serve, and you can pick how you serve it. In other words, I'm up to this, and here's how I'm going to go about it. That can happen from this place from which, this spiritual aspect of your being. This place is of long duration, as far back as you can remember. If you go back to your 7 or 8, this aspect of you, this place from which you can notice things, it was there then. and it's stable. It's kind of like the eye of a hurricane. There can be all kinds of thoughts and images and bodily sensations spinning around, kind of out on the side. But if you come to that center place, like the eye of a hurricane or a cyclone, there's kind of a calm stability there. And when you are there, there's a certainty of bodily control. Now, if you take yourself to that place, I'll just ask you to do it now. Take yourself to that place. What place? The place from which you can notice and notice that you're noticing. Then you won't have any trouble, I don't believe, having the thought, I cannot raise my right hand, and raising it. And you won't have any trouble having the thought, I have to raise my right hand, and putting it in your lap and not raising it. Now, you may not from this place have so much control over thoughts and images and bodily sensations, but what you do with your hands and arms and feet and mouth, from this place, you have a tremendous amount of control and you have the sense that you have it. When you're there, there is a sense of possessing a body and a mind, in contrast to being a body and a mind. You might say, you have a body and a mind in the same way that you have shoes and socks or a shirt or a dress. Yes, these are things that I have, but in a certain sense, I'm not them. And when you're there, just check it out. There's a sense of isness or beingness or aliveness, but no particular sense of goodness or badness, except there's a very good chance that you will like that buzz of being, that sense of aliveness. So let me stop my share and look in the chat to see if there are things that I should be responding to. I don't really see anything in here. So does anyone, like, we don't know what you're talking about, you got to do better than that. If you have one of those kinds of questions, then just speak up so I'll help me be better on track. Okay. So now I want to talk about leading principles and values. By a leading principle, I mean any direction that you can move. If I gave you a compass, the compass would point to magnetic north. And if you started out in that direction and I kept you sufficiently supplied, then eventually you'd get to that place on the planet we call magnetic north. The compass needle would kind of go slack, and every time you walked away from there, it points you right back where you came from. But on the other hand, if you took the same compass and you went either east or west, you would never come to a place like magnetic north. You could just keep going and going and going. That's what I mean by a leading principle. It provides a direction in life. Now, it's, you can differentiate it from a goal, because a goal is a place that you get to. And for example, if you want to graduate high school and you put in the seat time, at least in the United States, there's a very good chance that you will graduate. So the goal is attained. But if you want to be the best educated person you can be, no matter how long you pursue it, you can still get up the next day and pursue being the best educated person I can be. If you want to marry somebody, well, usually there's somebody, so you get married and the goal has been attained. But if you want to be the best mate you can be, when do you finish that? No matter how many days you've been the best mate you can be, you can get up the next day and pursue being the best mate you can be. By the way, when I talk about leading principles, usually they have the form of be the best X I can be, because though you could pick be the most mediocre or be really lousy at, most people don't want to be led by things like that. Finally, when it comes to children, if you want children, you can get them the usual way or you can adopt. And then once again, the goal is attained. But if you want to be the best parent you can be, when do you finish that? What they need at 2 is not what they need at 32, and a good parent can tell the difference. But no matter how old your children get, you can still follow that principle of being the best parent I can be. Values are a way or a manner to move in a direction. So whether I go east or west, directions that are opposite, I could travel by walking or running or jumping. A good way to think of values is they will end, at least in English, they will end in ly. They are adverbs. They add something to the verb. So I'm walking quickly. I'm walking slowly. I'm thinking poorly. I'm thinking considerately, and so on. So these are the two things, leading principles and values. And from the spiritual dimension of a human being, those are things that can be chosen. Those are things that we can pick. Now, a lot of people will give us, do this, pick that. But in the end, we're the ones who make the choice. Now, I might say, people often will talk about getting on a path, and that's not really what I'm talking about. If you look backwards in your life, there is a path because you made it. But if you look forward in your life, there is no path because nobody's ever lived your life before. There've been plenty of lives lived, but not yours. You might say, sort of, in any moment, we're in a wilderness moment because we've never been in this moment before. We might have been in lots of moments like it, but not this one. And in this moment, we can have direction even without a path. And our leading principles give us direction, and values tell us about traveling in that direction. Now, I want to say one more thing about leading principles. If you only have one, if you're sort of living life as a one-pointed meditation, be the best psychologist I can be and nothing else, then life will get very simple because it's this and nothing else. But if you are typical as a human being, we're interested in more than one thing. And so the issue of balancing your life is going to come up. And what you find is that balancing your life is a lot like riding a bicycle or being on one of these contraptions that you balance on. Because what you find is you're always a little bit out of balance and then you correct. And the whole point is to not correct so greatly, not to overcorrect, so that you actually fall over. Of course, if you fall over, then you can get back up. But balancing a life is really about being always somewhat out of balance and then re-correcting. So let me again stop my screen share and just, I am not, the part that notices who is noticing the noticing, is that only within oneself or in some way connected to others? What I would say about that is that buzz, that aliveness, you can often find it outside of yourself as well. In fact, I have found that a lot of people find it outside before they find it inside. Many people who have pets, they recognize that kind of buzz of aliveness, of beingness. They recognize it in their pet even sooner than they recognize it in themselves. But it's that buzz of existence is really all around us. And finding ways to be in connection with it is often part of people's spiritual adventure. Let's see. Could I give us an example of a leading principle or value? Oh, well, a leading principle would be the best psychologist I can be. Now, I pursue being the best psychologist I can be. Some of you may know that I'm a fishing nut. I'm a fly fishing nut. It's a kind of fishing. And I can't pursue both of those at the same time, standing in a river with a fishing rod in one hand and a cell phone in the other. That's not really pursuing either of them fully. But whether I'm being the best psychologist I can be or being the best fly fisher I can be, I could do both of them thoughtfully. I could do both of them considerately. So those thoughtfully and considerately, those are values, ways of doing something. Whereas be the best fly fisher, be the best psychologist, be the best mate, be the best dad, those would be leading principles. Hopefully I did better at that. Anybody else that I should any other issue I should try to address? If I'm not reading it, okay. So here we go. Now, if we were in the same place, I would invite someone up, and then I would invite everyone to pour yourself into that person so you can have the experience that they're having. But everyone is separated. So either you can just do this in your imagination, or you can get up and do it while I'm talking. You might say in life, if you want to travel someplace, there are things that you have to do. So look around your room where you are. There's probably a door or a window somewhere there. And I want this thing to be enough distant from you that you would have to travel to it. You can't reach it from where you are. It's just too far away. And you might say in the world, there are contingent musts, contingent have tos. If you're going to reach the door, if you're going to reach the window, you have to do some moving. So in that traveling, you might say you can travel under different banners. And one banner is, I have to, I have to, I have to. So I'm going to ask you either literally or in your imagination to travel across the room to whatever place it is that you have to do some movement. But I want you to go into the banner of I have to, I have to, I have to. And I want you to do one more thing. I want you to do it grudgingly. Now, again, I'm thinking most people know the difference between grudgingly and willingly. So I'd like you to travel. I have to, I have to, I have to grudgingly. So I'll take a moment to let you imagine or literally do that. And then I'm going to have you make that journey again. Only this time I want you to go under a different banner. And this banner is, I choose to, I choose to, I choose to, and I'd like you to do it willingly rather than grudgingly. So again, here I go. I choose to, I choose to, I choose to willingly, and make that journey. Now, one thing you're going to notice is you're in exactly the same place. Where you went to didn't change, but I'm predicting that your experience of traveling was quite different. And that if you were to pick, well, which one would I prefer? You would pick traveling under the banner of I choose to willingly, because that's the life of a liberated human being. It's not the life of a slave. I have to, I have to, I have to. So any direction that you care to pick, you can pick. Any way or manner of moving, you can pick. And the most important manner, the most important value, I would say, is willingly. If I'm going to do anything, then I have the choice of, do I do it willingly? Do I do it grudgingly? Do I open my heart to the experience, you might say, or am I here with a closed heart to the way life actually is? So we might say that the formula for spiritual liberation is by willingly doing something unpleasantly and willingly refraining from doing something pleasant in the service of something I choose to make more important. I will never have to be a slave to circumstance, either inside or outside my skin. Now, one of the things you'll notice about this formula is things in and of themselves are not important. They're important because of how we relate to them. We do things with our hands and arms and feet and mouth that make them important. That's how something becomes important. Now, I'll grant you, we might really, really care about something. It might really move us. We might really resonate with it. But that's not important until we make it important, until we pursue it. Otherwise, it just lays over to the side and nothing happens with it. By the way, I've submitted these slides, and everybody can get copies of the slides. So if you're frantically scribbling, you can now stop because they're available. Now, there is also what I would call the formula for serenity in action. And I began with a very popular, well-known serenity prayer by a guy named Reinhold Niebuhr. At least it's popular and well-known over here in the United States and some other places. But so I want to acknowledge where I began my theft. But this one goes a little differently. May I willingly acknowledge, that is to say, give my permission or accept. By the way, I stole this acknowledgement notion from somebody who I heard give a presentation at a conference a couple of years ago, ACBS conference in Dublin. And she said, I work a lot with business people, and they can't do accept. Accept just doesn't work for them. And so, but acknowledgement, like, well, it's here. Okay, are you going to acknowledge that it's here? Or are you going to deny that it's here? Well, there it is. So willingly acknowledge, not grudgingly acknowledge. Life as I find it, as life is, or as it was, or as it may be, even though I may not approve of what I find. I mean, this is a place where we often don't get what we want and do get what we don't want. And we feel sad about that. And then we die. Who would pick this place? You know, we're not on the committee, it seems. And yet here we are. We don't approve of all this. You know, they didn't even check with me. They just sent me here. Okay, I don't approve of it, but I'm going to willingly acknowledge it. Have wisdom, discernment to see what would be good to change or to continue. Some things are better left alone. Don't mess with them. Willingly act and willingly follow through, and be grateful for the opportunity to try to live my life as best I can. Now, every other being on the planet besides human beings, they are living their life as best as they can, because for them, there is no later. There is no past. There's only right here, right now. But for human beings, language gives us the possibility of an end in view. It gives us the possibility of leading principles. You don't find any other being except a human being walking around with a calendar for, oh, we're going to do this in 6 months. We're the only ones. But what that means is we have an opportunity to try to live our lives as best we can. And while it may seem like a curse in some ways, it is also something that I suggest we can be grateful for. No other beings except human beings, as far as we know, have this kind of chance. So let me talk about spiritual love. Looking out for someone or some things' long-term best interests. It's a choice. And you notice I didn't say someone else's or some things else's. You can love yourself. You can look out for your own long-term best interest. From the spiritual dimension of your being, you can choose to be good to me. Now, do you have to? No. Do you have to have reasons so that it's okay for you to do it? No. You could just pick it because it's available. And why would you? Well, because loving yourself works better than not. And it's a choice that's not necessarily related to affection, affiliation, or sexual attraction. Affection, you want to pat somebody on the head or pat them even on the bottom. Affiliation, you have shared interests, or sexual attraction. I don't think I have to explain that one. And this is why you can love your teenagers, because you don't have any affection for them. You want to hit them in the head. You don't want to pat them on the head. You don't have any affiliation. You can't share anything with them. Everything they want to do is nothing you're interested in. And it's not just that there's no sexual attraction because they're your offspring. It's because they create an image of themselves that is not very attractive. And yet, you still step in and look for their long-term best interest. And I'd also want to underline, I said, not only someone, but some things. You can love a river. You can look out for the long-term best interest of a forest. You could love the planet. Okay, so I want to stop here and ask, is there, let's look in the chat here to see if there are other things.
I can help you with the chat. We have a question.
Okay.
Would that be useful, or do you want to look through the chat?
Oh, no. That actually, yes, that would be useful. Would you do that for me, please?
Yeah, I'll look up for that. Yeah. So we have a question, and the question is, could you please give us your thoughts of metacognition?
Well, I would say metacognition is noticing that you're noticing. You're thinking about your thinking, but what's thinking about thinking? It's just noticing your thoughts. And then if you notice that you're noticing your thoughts, well, now you've got a metacognition. I mean, that's the thing about noticing. It goes on and on and on and on. And if you really pursue it, pretty soon the noticer just disappears. All that is present, or you might see the other way around. What is being noticed disappears, and the only thing that's present is the noticer. In other words, you begin to get a sense of just full unity. There is no up, down, left, right, forward, backward. Relational framing just drops out. So that's how I would address metacognition. If you mean, maybe I need more information about what is meant by that. Okay, another question?
No, we don't have any other questions, but
Okay.
Rachna asked the question. So did the question get answered, Rachna, or do you want to unmute yourself and ask about that?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Hank. Thanks, Sindhu, for that. Yeah, I think it answered my question mostly, but I was, thinking that it could be very related to what you were talking about today in terms of spirituality. Is that the beginning of spirituality? Is that the way you start understanding how you notice things, how you understand things, how you perceive things overall? I thought metacognition could be the basic element.
Yes. Sometimes metacognitions, people talk about them in terms of schemas. Before I came to ACT, I was involved with rational emotive behavior therapy. And there, people don't talk about thoughts, they talk about beliefs. Their ABC is not antecedent behavior and consequence, it's antecedent belief and consequence. And you can have thoughts like, think this thought, I'm a banana. Well, you can think it and you could think it all day, but you would not be very likely to believe it. In other words, you wouldn't be taking it seriously. And there are things that we take seriously in life, but we don't even have any thoughts about them. If you were to try to get into an automobile and there is a way of getting into an automobile, you're going to reach for the door handle and you're not going to have any thoughts about it. But there is a rule that describes your behavior. And that, you might say, that rule is an indication of what you believe about getting into the car. So the way I get into the car is to open the door handle. Well, you didn't have any thoughts about it, but clearly you take seriously the notion that that's the way in. So sometimes when people are talking about metacognition, they mean something like what we are taking seriously, and then we try to give a verbal wraparound to whatever it is. Now, sometimes we have thoughts and we take those seriously, or we have bodily sensations, we take those seriously, we have images we take seriously. And whether or not it's useful to take them seriously, well, we can come back to, well, what are our leading principles and values? If taking this seriously helps me pursue my leading principles and values, then great. But if it doesn't help, then how about taking something else seriously? Is that any better?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hank.
Okay.
We have a few more questions.
Okay.
Go ahead, Veera.
Yeah. We have one more question from Geetanjali. A few questions, couple of new questions. She wants to know, where does the soul feature in all this? Where does the soul feature here? Does it have any relevance?
Well, by soul, do you mean something other than the spirit that I've been describing? The thing from the place from which you notice and notice that you're noticing, and that you can even keep noticing, the place that has a sort of a stability to it, the place that isn't changed by what it notices. Are you imagining there's some other thing besides that?
Maybe Geetanjali can unmute and clarify her question. Geetanjali?
If soul is just another name for spirit, then it's just two names for the same thing.
Yeah, I asked because we do hear about the soul, and we talk, in ACT, we talk about the observing self or the pure awareness which you're referring to. So is it, like you said, is it the same thing that we are talking about, or does it make sense to see it as two things?
In my language world, we have this little trilogy, this little triumvirate of mind, body, spirit. You could make it mind, body, soul. That's not the way it usually shows up in my language community. So one of the reasons I picked spirit is because it's already laying around in my culture. And if you had another word that means the same thing, that third part of a human being, the part that isn't their mind, the part that isn't their body, then whatever word that is, use that word, because we do need something so we can designate or discriminate or discern that aspect of our being that we are talking about. Now, while I'm on this subject, let me say that it is easy for people to begin thinking, oh, this spiritual part, this is the real me. You know, that sense of possession that you have when you're at the spiritual dimension of I have a body and I have a mind, but they're not the real me. That turns out to be not helpful, because now you begin to get alienated from life itself. So I use that phrase and more. So you might say, I am a body and more. I am a mind and more. I am a spirit and more. Well, what's the more? The more is all that I have done up till now, all that has preceded me through the eons of time. I'm all that too right now. And from the notion of the human potential movement, right at this moment, I'm everything that I could possibly do in this moment. All of my behavioral repertoire is available to me right here, right now. To use my favorite saints, St. John and St. Paul, John Lennon and Paul McCartney, there is nothing you can do that can't be done. And right here, right now, it's all available. That's who you are. So if you're going to identify with something, identify with that. And a good way to get there is, yes, I am that and more. Any other question?
Yeah, one more question by Kavya. She wants to know what you are explaining to us now. Does it have similarities with the Stoic philosophy, the Greek Stoicism, or is it different?
Does say that word again, because I'm hearing Cyclops.
Stoicism, Stoic philosophy, Greek philosophy, Stoic.
STOIC.
I see.
Stoicism. Stoic.
Stoic.
Oh, does this approach have a Stoic
Similar.
component?
Yeah.
Oh yes, I think very much, because well, the cultural background that I come from has that in it, historically, European. And on my way to ACT, I went through, as I said, rational emotive behavior therapy. And the sort of prime statement of that approach is people are not disturbed by things. They are disturbed by their view of things. And that is Epictetus, a well-known Stoic philosopher. So just as a side note, Albert Ellis, who is the guy who began rational emotive behavior therapy, was a kind of philosophy nut. So he actually was trained as a psychoanalyst and found that the thing that he most wanted to address, which was sexual difficulties, was just not very helpful. Psychoanalysis didn't do much for that. So he went back into his long-term interest of philosophy and picked up on Stoicism, but Epicureanism as well. because as I was noting, it's not just about duty, duty, duty. It's about what is it that deeply moves you. I don't want to eschew the body and just put it to the side and say, you know, you have a role in life, now go fulfill it. Well, that's an approach. You could have that, but that's not the one I'm advocating here. The one I want to advocate is there are things that resonate within you. And, you know, that's sort of the individualism that European ideas can bring to the spiritual table, that it is not just you as a kind of oh, I don't know, kind of a printout, kind of a stamped out being of woman or husband or daughter or son, you know, and here you are, and just do what you're supposed to do. I'm much more interested in, no, there's something that differentiates every being individually, and the pursuit of the fulfillment of that is a thing worth doing. Now, you don't have to. You can say, oh, no, put all that to a side. That's just selfishness. That's just, you know, that's that European craziness that people think individuals are something worth pursuing. But I think maybe it is a valuable thing to pursue. Now, the thing about pursuing anything is, if you go back to the formula of human liberation and serenity in action, you do have to put yourself in the service of something. You know, be the best psychologist I can be. Oh, you mean I'm going to have to do that? You know, well, that doesn't sound like fun. But that's what's required. You know, I'm going to be the best parent I can be. I'm going to have to do that. You know, I'm going to be the best mate I can be. I'm going to have to do that. Well, are you going to serve or not? The point I would be driving at is you get to pick. Are you going to pick that? Or are you going to pick something else? Are you going to pick the way that you pursue whatever it is you're pursuing? Compassionately, thoughtfully? Or is that what you're going to pick? Because a lot of people will tell you, you got to pick this, but you don't have to. The world for picking from the spiritual dimension, not from your mind, not from your body, is wide open. And so we are liberated from our cultural constraints of, no, you can only live this way. Now, of course, you'll be a troublemaker, and you know, there's that curse. May you come to the attention of the authorities. Well, maybe if you do, they'll elevate you, but they might want to push you down too. So it's a tough world. How am I doing?
Yeah, good. Actually, we have a couple of more questions, but I thought you can finish your presentation and we'll take these questions at the end.
Okay, good. So now let me talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness is you just stop holding the facts against someone. So take a moment and imagine, bring forward some mistreatment that you have had in the past. And if you really want to get after this, you can even write out what the mistreatment was, how you were not treated correctly. Or in my office, I don't see anybody in my office for many months because of COVID, but I have a piece of indestructible paper with the word facts written on it, because I don't care what the facts are, just these are them. Well, if I was there in my office, or if I was with you, I would say, okay, now I want you to take those facts and I want you to hold them against my deltoid muscle with your index finger. And I want you to push hard enough on those facts on that piece of paper and against me to hurt me. And usually people are gentle, they won't hurt me. And I say, no, 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 you got to push harder. And if you can imagine doing this, then what you will find is if you push hard enough to hurt someone, it actually hurts your index finger. So to hold the facts against someone hard enough to hurt them, it's painful to you too. Well, okay, so you can, you can back off a little bit. You hold the facts against them lightly, and it's not painful for them, and it's not painful for you. But if you want to get up and walk around in the world, it's a little inconvenient because you got to drag them around with you all the time so you can keep holding the facts against them. But if you just pull your finger away, what happens to the paper? It drifts down to the floor. Forgiveness is you just stop holding the facts against someone. Now, often they're not even there. They may even be dead. So it's like holding the facts against the wall. There's nobody on the other side feeling anything. And of course, you can hold the facts against yourself. Now you're on both ends. You know, if you push hard enough, it hurts both one part of you and another part of you. And if you just hold it lightly, well, now I got only one hand to use in life. So forgiveness is not about forgetting the facts. It's not about excusing the facts. It's not about understanding the facts. It's not about explaining the facts. Forgiveness is changing your relationship with the facts by no longer holding the facts against someone or something. And it is a spiritual option because you can't change the facts, but you can change your relationship to the facts. You can stop holding them against someone. Now, in this little metaphor that I've created, notice something else. Remember that paper that had the facts on it? If you pick it up and look at it, are those the facts or are those a bunch of words on a piece of paper? You know, the magic of relational frame theory is suddenly those words aren't words. They're actual events, but they're not here. They're just words on a piece of paper. As Miranda was saying earlier, the past is done. It's not here. It's over with. It's gone. Where are we living? Right here, right now? Where are your feet? Where are you? Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I want to underline that. It does not require reconciliation. Reconciliation is you give them a chance to do it again, just as they did it before, or in a new way, because people are inventive. They may hurt you in a different way than they did the last time. Reconciliation is not necessary because sometimes the people are dead. You're not going to reconcile with them. They're not around. You can't give them another chance. Sometimes I've dealt with, often it's women who've been sexually mistreated by some family member, but they still want to go to things like family reunions where this person is. And they were mistreated as a child, so they go to the reunion, but they really don't give the person a chance to do it again. They never leave them alone with a kid, or they never are in the same room with them alone. So you can forgive because forgiveness is mainly for the forgiver. It's not so much for the one being forgiven because you get to stop holding the facts against someone, which doesn't work out so well in your life. But if you do reconcile, it's an exciting adventure. It's a risk. If you knowingly take a risk, you will feel the risk. And the name of that feeling is afraid. Nothing's wrong. That's just how it works. Now, you get a 17 or an 18-year-old, they take risks all the time, but they don't knowingly take risks, so they're not afraid. But if you know what you're getting yourself into, if you realize, well, this is a risk, I could get hurt. I could get hurt by this person again in the same way they did it the last time. On the other hand, something cool could come out of this. That's why I'm going to take that risk. What am I going to lean on? The potential for pain, the potential for fulfillment, because they're both there. That's why it's not just an adventure of survival. It's an exciting adventure. Something cool could come out of this. So if you want to develop spiritually, at least in the model that I've been presenting, then willingly act. Willingly acknowledge the world as it is, was, or may be. Willingly choose and willingly follow your leading principles and values, and willingly teach others to do the same. There'll never be enough books written, whatever, unless people bring this to those around them. That's the only chance of really an extended, wide spiritual development for all of humanity. And each of us can be that vehicle if we choose it. So that is the end of my slides and the end of my sharing, and we have 10 minutes.
Well, thanks, Hanks. That was a brilliant exposition of spirituality and how to do it through acts, how to willingly, accept your givens, and then, respond to it in a really psychologically flexible way, and to go by your principles and values. And then you lead by example, and then model your behavior, and then teach by example. So that is what I've understood through your presentation. So we have 10 minutes more, and actually Carl wanted to ask you a question. He was raising a hand. Carl, can you unmute yourself and ask your question now?
Yeah, I was thinking if it was a suitable time for you, Hank, to elaborate on behaviorisms or the functional contextualism take on monism and naturalism instead of our everyday sort of dichotomy of Cartesian thinking.
Yes. Europeans had a big impact on the people in India, but the people in India had a big impact on people in Europe, at least intellectually, because the Europeans especially had this dualism that they were cultivating. And you referred to Rene Descartes. He's a later classical example, because he had this Latin phrase that meant, I think, therefore I am. Now, later, the French existentialists turn it completely around and say, I am, therefore I think. Very upsetting to some. But why was this Cartesian dualism important? Because the thinking thing was the spaceless, weightless, timeless stuff. It was in contrast to the physical thing, which took up space existed in time and had weight. Now, of course, Einstein messed everything up because he said, well, space-time is pretty much the same thing. But let's give Descartes his due. And he presents this dualism. There's two kinds of stuff in the world. And very importantly, since the churches at the time, the religious establishment at the time, were making life very unpleasant if you got out of line with them. And they said, and Descartes said, and apparently he was legitimate. He wasn't a charlatan about this. He was a faithful Catholic, Roman Catholic, who actually, if you study Cartesian mathematics and what those curves are really about is how can we better get bombshells to fall on the Huguenot towns so we can do them in. That's what all that mathematics is actually about. So he was legit in his ideas. And what's important is this spaceless, weightless, timeless stuff that we're going to give to the church because that's what comes first. That's primary. Now, this physical stuff, like how does the body work and stuff like that, well, it's secondary. So just leave us scientists alone, because actually Descartes, like Harvey in England, was very interested in how does blood flow work in the body, and it was a nice peacemaking device until this German Wilhelm Wundt said, well, okay, we'll stick with the dualism, but it turns out we're going to claim that the methods of science can be used on the spiritual, the psychological dimension. And that started upsetting the apple cart in about 1870 or so. And then you get these monists, people who say, no, there's only one kind of stuff. And usually they're physicalists. So there's only one kind of stuff, and it's physical stuff. And that was the attraction of thought from India. All one. Yes, there are various dimensions, but you just slide back and forth. It's all one thing. And then in the United States, you get someone like John Watson, who said, there is no spaceless, timeless stuff. It just doesn't exist. And so instead of using scientific methods to study the mind, the spaceless, weightless, timeless stuff, there is no mind. And that's why in the United States, they say with Watson, psychology lost its mind. And Skinner was the same way. He was a monist. He wasn't buying this, which made him a pariah in all religious circles because he was a monist. Now, the thing that Steve has brought and colleagues have brought forward is, okay, we're only going to go for one world, but we're going to be, that fancy word, ontological. We're not going to give a description of what the one world is made of, because that just goes nowhere. I mean, you can go on and on and on and on. It doesn't seem to have an end to it. So one world, and what's the nature of the one world? We'll just leave it alone. What we're interested in is, well, what are you trying to do? Okay, well, what works for that? What works not for that? That's the way to make progress. First, ask yourself, what the heck are you trying to do? And to go back to what I was saying, to pursue what you find way cool. Now, one of the reasons I'm a nutcase on the listserv is I just find that way cool. And, technology allows me to have a community that's all around the planet. And, there's like people say, well, there's, a couple of thousand people on the listserv. Well, there's 8 billion of us? And I found 2,000 that'll listen, to what I have to say. How lucky can I be? So I come back to, so what are you up to? What are you trying to do here? And that's following leading principles and values. So how am I doing?
Yeah, and I sort of, I think it's way cool to focus on what I and everyone else as humans are doing inside their skin and outside their skin in one world, uh, and it's still monism. So
Yeah, you might
that,
say we are of the world. You know, we're just one more manifestation of the all.
Thanks, Carl, for asking that question. Um, Next question, Aditi wants to know, how do you relate the willingness part to situations where people are faced with oppression or other social discrimination?
Yeah,
Well,
I just like to add to that. Sorry, just one part that I would like to add to that question is when you talked about forgiveness and reconciliation. How do we talk about these things in a way that is not minimizing someone's lived experience in a social situation where they are experiencing these things, but at the same time sort of shift the focus to them as individuals and how they choose to move forward.
people have things they like and they have things they don't like. So when you're in a place where things are going on that you don't like, the question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to put up with it? I mean, as far as I know, there's three choices. You put up with things the way they are, you work for change, or you try to leave, including you kill yourself. That'll get you out of it. But you could immigrate. You could go somewhere else. So whichever of the first two you're going to do, put up with things the way they are or work for change, okay. Are you going to do them willingly or grudgingly? Because grudgingly is just going to make it harder. If you want to agitate and make trouble and have change, well, okay. But don't forget, people who are oppressing you didn't get in that position by giving up easily. So get ready. There's going to be some work to do. And these kinds of social changes occur because people are working together. You know, I take note of the fact that in Myanmar, the first thing that they do is knock out the internet so people can't communicate. And you know, that's lately now what everybody does. You know, let's get them, you know, knock out the internet so these people can't coordinate what they're doing. So if it's some kind of social change, then having a network of people to work at the change, there you go. If it's more individual or personal, you still have a network. If the network is only you as therapist and them as client, or if the network is your family members, but I like to say the only value of self-reliance is sometimes there's nobody else. And on those occasions where there is nobody else, then it is very useful to be able to rely on yourself. But when there are others, well, I mean, we're a bunchy group. You know, we're the chimpanzee side. We're not the orangutan side, living all alone by themselves in the forest. They get together once in a while and have sex so that there can be another orangutan. So if you can connect with other people, that's more how we are. Does that help answer that?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. I think it does. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
when it comes to that word reconciliation, it occurred to me that if you think about the South African truth and reconciliation process, it's two things. Truth, what the hell is really going on here? And reconciliation.
Thank you. Thanks. We move on to the maybe the final question. In regard to the culture context, can we replace the word spiritual or spirituality? Because sometimes patients mix it with religion and it causes them discomfort. How can we deal with it?
Um, words are just something to help us do things. So if it's a word that doesn't help do something, then don't use it. Then you can talk about self as context, and you'll have a word that gets you all of the things that I've been talking about, and you don't have the spiritual aspect to it. But it increasingly in the European world and in the United States, there are increasingly numbers of people who describe themselves as spiritual but not religious. And there are plenty of religious people who are looking for spirituality in a way that really can work for them. And even within the context of religious ideology, the things that I have been describing will often work for people when you're talking about the spiritual dimension. But where it really gets tough is this idea of individuality. If the culture describes the what you might call the flowering of individual uniqueness, if they call that selfishness, if they call that too much ego involvement, then you're encouraging a troublemaker, and troublemakers have the life of a troublemaker. Are you sure you want that? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. The point is, it's your choice. At least that's what I would bring to the situation. You can give yourself to the culture into which you were born. That is a choice you can make. But you could make another choice, but you can't make it without a bunch of consequences. Does that help?
Sure, Hank.
Hank,
Sindhu,
I have a question. Veera, can you facilitate this for me, please?
sure. Go ahead,
I'm
Rachna.
All right,
to
thank you.
continue.
Yeah, thank you.
This for me is way cool, so I won't quit until you do.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for that. Hank, this is, while you were speaking about forgiveness, right? Call this therapist's anxiety or whatever, but I find it really hard to help a client understand forgiveness, but you have defined it very, very, very nicely, and I've taken pictures of that so that I remember it. But do you have any thoughts on how I could facilitate forgiveness from my client?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit.
Okay.
Forgiveness for your client. I missed the last part.
Okay, I was asking if you have any thoughts on forgiveness, how I facilitate forgiveness for a client, because it's the therapist's anxiety, right? Like I want something tangible, and the client may or may not want something tangible, but it is more my question.
Rachna, somehow your question is not clear. I mean, do you want to?
Yeah, are you asking, Rachna, if how do we as therapists start the conversation of forgiveness with clients? How do we word that?
Are you able to hear me clearly?
We are able to hear you.
Okay.
Like Veera
Yeah.
said, I'm also having trouble understanding what exactly the question is. So when you say, how can I facilitate? What do you mean by that? Do you mean how do you word the conversation? How do you start the conversation?
Yeah. That could be the direction.
Well, I would start by showing that little metaphor, that little physical metaphor of what it is to be holding the facts against someone, if I thought that's what was happening in the person's life. And then if they can see, oh yes, I am holding the facts against someone, and they've got it coming. That's usually the next part that's right behind it. There's another presentation that I have on righteous indignation, which I call the drug of choice for humans. You think cocaine or opium is big, just try righteous indignation all around the world, man. And all you need is some language. It's person rating, demandingness, and entitlement. You worthless so-and-so, you mustn't treat me this way. I'm entitled to something different. And, you know, when you're the avenging angel of the Lord who've been sent to fix their friggin' wagon, it often feels pretty good. And all you have to do is have some language and you can put it right together. So sometimes it, and now the upside of righteous indignation is that unlike sorrow, which is painful, righteous indignation has an anesthetic quality. So you don't feel the pain so much. And sorrow is deflating, but righteous indignation is energizing. So it is difficult to give it up because it's such a great drug. And if you do give it up, what are you going to experience? You're going to experience sorrow. Well, now we're right back to where we started. This is how life works. Who put us here? What kind of setup is this? All right, so now sorrow is best experienced rather than treated as a problem. There are problems. I've been dealing with this person. How am I going to deal with them? Am I going to keep holding the facts against them? Or am I going to let that go? Because that's what forgiveness is. And usually people can feel it in themselves. They can feel the difference between I'm just letting it go. And really, what are you letting go? You're letting go of that stuff that's on that piece of paper, which is, if it's not on the piece of paper, if it's just in your head, it's thoughts and images. That's what you're going to let go of. You might say it this way. There isn't any doubt that I'm a man. I have no doubt about that at all. But if I take that fact very seriously, I'm a man, I'm a man, I'm a man, I'm a man, I'm a man. How's this presentation going to go? It's not going to go too well. It is a fact. I'm a man. It's a true thought, but it doesn't help me do what I would like to do, which is be helpful in this presentation. It doesn't help me to take that fact seriously. Now, there are plenty of facts in my history, and does it help me to take them seriously right here, right now? Maybe some other time or place. I'm very fond of something from the Hebrew Jewish Christian tradition. There's a book called Ecclesiastes, and in that book it says there's a time for every purpose under heaven. So the question is, what time is this? Is it time to take this seriously, or is it time to take something else seriously? Well, from where do you make that discernment? That's a spiritual activity. Discerning, well, what time is this? What does the context here call for? Am I helping?
Of course,
Yes,
thank you so much. Thank you, Sindhu, for pitching it.
so I think we are way past the cutoff time of 9:30. Thanks for a wonderful presentation. This is a very abstract concept of spirituality and act, but you just weaved your magic here, giving apt metaphors, examples, and pithy comments and examples so that we understood what you are articulating. And you brought in Advaita, Monism, and European philosophy, and you connected everything to behaviorism and modern psychology. So thanks for this wonderful presentation. We will like to have you give that presentation of righteous indignation as well. maybe in the near future, so that we will know more about that. So with that, we will wind up this session. Over to you, Sindhu, to wrap it up, wrap the day.
Thank you so much once again, Hank. And for everybody who don't know this, Hank has woken up early just for us. He usually likes sleeping late on a Saturday morning. So thank you so much for doing this to us. Everyone asking questions about the presentation and everything, we'll put it up on the Google Drive. Hank has sent it to us. So watch out for that in a couple of days. Thank you once again, Hank. We loved hearing you.
Thank you so much for the chance and wish you the best on your second day.
Yes, thank you.
And all dear participants, we have tomorrow session starting at 12:30 Indian time. So please look out for your time zones, respective time zones, and we would all look forward to meeting you tomorrow. Had a wonderful day today and lovely audience, and we're really happy and glad the way how you have been such energetic and enthusiastic and interactive participants. So thank you so much. See you all tomorrow.
Yeah, and one last question: where and when are we going to be able to watch the recordings?
So for the time being, we have understood it as for all the ACBS members, we will make it accessible with the ACB. We are collaborating with the ACBS on making it as a DN committee resource library that we are bringing up for the people from developing nations, and also all the participants also should be able to access it. So you will receive a detailed email on how and where you will be able to access it after the conference is over.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good night, good day, whatever the time zones you are in. Wonderful. Bye.